Hi everyone, my name is Robin Bowling, and this video is for teachers who have English language learners in their classroom, specifically if those English language learners speak Spanish as their home language. So I designed this video to try to help out maybe the teachers who do not have any background in Spanish but would like to know a little bit more about where their students are coming from. So when teaching English language learners, the first thing that is very important is to recognize the errors that are caused by interference from their first language, also known as L1, as you can see in the screen. From my experiences, both learning and teaching a new language, the learners tend to frame the new language in comparison to their first language knowledge. I think that's pretty natural process. Therefore, it is good to have a little bit of background knowledge of the first language. Then, once the teacher understands the background knowledge, then they can determine which errors might be a cognitive or a more, might need speech pathology and things like that, or if it's just a natural influence from Spanish. So, once the teacher has this kind of background knowledge, they can predict the common errors for this group of ELLs that speak Spanish, and then they can plan their instruction to focus on these problem areas. Secondly, acknowledging, even sometimes including, the home language in the classroom shows students that their identity and culture are valuable and that they are valued. We never want to imply that someone's home language is bad. A better method is to teach that languages may have different uses or different contexts, and academic English, as we've learned, is the language of class instruction, and so we just want to make sure that they have all the tools that they need to succeed. So now that we know a little bit of the benefits of why we can address these areas of interference, let's look at a few common errors. I have picked out 3 of the main errors. Okay, so sorry, I was trying to. I don't think the picture's on there now. It says hiding. Okay. So I just wanted to show the first rule in Spanish is that each verb form changes endings according to the subject, and you can see over here in Spanish that this is the I and corresponds with the colors, and then the ending shows which subject they are talking about. So therefore, because each ending has a matching subject, then they can also leave out the subject and it still makes sense. You can still tell from the end. However, if you look over here at the English, that the endings, most of them just use the plain form run, and then only the third person singular in this box has an S. So that is the difference. Also, ELLs might have problems because they might associate the S with plural nouns and mistakenly maybe assume that it's the verb ending for plural subjects. So, what are the influences on English? What happens? Well, the ELLs might forget the third person singular S in the present tense, like I just mentioned. And they also may forget to include a subject pronoun because in their language it wasn't required. Okay, so they may forget an explicit subject, but they need to be instructed, and that is our job, to show them that it is mandatory in English, mostly because the verb is not marked to show the subject. So here we have a couple errors using that rule about verb conjugations and the endings. So the first error would be I speak Spanish, Ms. Bowling speaks English. I almost corrected it myself, but it would be Ms. Bowling speaks English. That's the problem that they need to have corrected, because the I form, the first person form, does not have an S, but only the third person singular does have an S. Another example is my brother is smart, learn fast. So in this case we talked about in Spanish, sometimes they leave out the subject pronoun. This is an example of that. And the second rule in Spanish we're going to look at is that there are 2 be verbs. estar and ser if you know Spanish, but if you don't, just remember that they're different depending on their usage. And then also we have in Spanish that any kind of expressions of age, hunger, and thirst. In English, where we would usually use the be verb, in Spanish we use have. So how does this influence their English? Well, first of all, ELLs may think that English has two verbs that both mean to be. Excuse me. So it is possible that they may not be sure of, they want to know the context, and you can assure them that we just have one form of be. And the second kind of confusion from interference might be that ELLs may use have, and that is something that's very common in their language. So I have a couple example errors down here. For example, the first one is I have hungry, which is kind of a direct translation from Spanish. And so we need to help them remember that it would be I am hungry, using the be verb. And another one is she has 20 years, talking about age. And so we would want to help them understand that in English, the correct expression is she is 20 years old at the end. Okay, the third rule that I'm going to talk about is talking about present and present progressive, which would be just our things that we're doing right now. So the present progressive is going to have words that have ing, and it's going to be combined with the be verb. So the rule in Spanish is that the present or the present progressive can both be used for a current action. And how this influences their English is that our ELLs may they may end up overusing the present tense, using it more often than it would be needed in English. And another example is that the ELLs may not understand when English speakers try to use the present progressive to talk about the future, because in English, the present progressive is used in more situations. So for example errors would be she eats now, okay, which would be a translation from Spanish, but the English uses the present tense only for things that are everyday repeated actions, general truths, while the present progressive is used for current actions in progress. So for this, we're going to use the current actions in progress is going to be she is eating now. Then in Spanish, they can also use the present tense to refer to the future. You just have to put in adverbial in here. And so this is a translation for she goes tomorrow. And we would help them in English know that it's probably she is going tomorrow. Okay, so in closing, just a couple things that I want to mention is the first question is how much grammar is too much? This is a very kind of heavy grammatical topic, but the degree to which you want to use the grammatical concepts in class depends on the student's cognitive abilities. Obviously, I think that it wouldn't be developmentally appropriate to use like complex grammatical terms with kindergartners, but you could still practice the verb forms and acquire that language from input. Another key understanding for our teachers is to know that multiple students that speak Spanish still are going to have a variety of cultural backgrounds. So Spanish is the official language of 20 countries, and each of these countries has different customs and dialects, and as teachers we need to be careful not to overgeneralize from one student to the next. And to compare it to English, this would be kind of like assuming a student who spoke English from Chicago had the same cultural background as someone from London, or maybe someone from Sydney, Australia, or even another part of the United States. So I think the most important lesson is that we respect our students for their individual differences, but we also want to pay attention to the background language and those kinds of issues that might bring up in their English language learning so that we can help them succeed as quickly as possible. Thank you.